Now, how long have you been doing this? 1993, is that right?
It started in 2007. This
Okay.
is year 19, and I co-founded it with Lana Hechtman Ayers, and it was inspired in part by the 315 experiment that Danica Dinsmore did out of Naropa, the Naropa Institute, which became Naropa University. She and some other language experimenters, including Bernadette Mayer, got up every day in August at 3:15 a.m. or set their alarm clock to 3:15 and began writing to try and capture the language written from a hypnopompic or hypnagogic state, the state just before fully waking or the state before going to sleep. And I did that, the 315 experiment, after they invited me for a couple of years, but I was not a 315 fundamentalist. As the month went by, it started turning into the 515 and then the 815. It might have been a 1015 by the time at the end of the month. And I just thought that waking up at 3:15 a.m. was inconvenient. But I love the idea of doing something in August that created a feeling that poetry was a little higher up on the priority list than other things and than it usually is. And so I said to Lana, I'd like to do something this August with postcards, poetry postcards. And she said, I'll help. What beautiful words for anyone to hear. I'll help. And she helped really get the language and really create a different network for the festival than the network that I was building through what was then Spoken Word Lab, SPLAB. The women's poetry list, WAMPO, she put it out to that. And so started to meet, well, I wouldn't say meet, but started to engage with or exchange postcards with people who I otherwise would not have met. And I did want to have some kind of exercise in spontaneity. And that's how it was done back in the day. Jimmy Buffett writing, "The weather is here. I wish you were beautiful," for instance, um, to turn around the typical postcard. And so to have something to not feel like there was the World War IV writing on what you wrote, but just to get something, just to get someone a little sense of the here and now in your life, capture the shadow of the moment, and be real. And so that's how it got started, and it's happened. This is the 19th actual festival. It's gone through some different name changes. It's gone through some different starting times because we started getting the lists together on the 4th of July. But what's the sense in waiting 3 weeks to give people their lists? So we thought, give them their lists now and give them more time to write the 31 cards. Although some people are still attached to the poem a day concept and don't start sending cards out till August 1st. So newcomers will be like, I'm getting cards. Am I doing it wrong? Or I'm not getting cards. What's happening? And other things like that. So we like to use the website now to answer a lot of those questions, in part because I've abandoned Facebook and Veronica doesn't want to go there. So we've kind of given up on Facebook as a place, although there's a Poetry Postcard Fest Facebook group, and it was pretty lively back in the day. And it was there, I think, from the very beginnings of the festival. So I hope that provides some background.
Do. So I'm going to share this with you guys. Here we go. Come on, give me the presentation view. Ta-da. Okay, here we are. Um, I'm going to run through the really briefly the basics of the Poetry Postcard Fest. This information is also available on the website. But this is just for people who are verbal learners. You get to hear me blab. So this is basic stuff about how the fest works. And then Zach is going to go through how the new sign up works, which is probably going to be helpful for those of us who have done this before, because the sign up process is a little new this year. Okay, so the basic backbone is that you write a poem a day for about 31 days. As Paul mentioned, it's actually kind of more like 56 days because you can get started when you get your list, which is in July. Um, and you send one poem on one postcard a day to each person on your list. You'll also get 31 poems from those other 31 people on your list over the course of that month and a half. Um, your list should get to you in July. And what you'll do is send one postcard on one or one poem on one postcard each day to the next person on your list. So here's how it works. You'll get this list of people and it'll have their names and the address. And here's you on the list. Maybe you're in the middle. You might be at the top. You might be at the bottom. What you do is, oh, come on. Oh, please. You go to the next person on the list and you write them the first poem and send the first postcard. And you keep going down the list once a day until you've gotten all the way down here and come all the way back here till you get to the person who was right before you on the list. So by the end, you will have gone through all the people on the list that aren't you. I mean, if you want to send a postcard to yourself, you could do that. Why not? Okay, don't know what that is. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the poems. As Paul said, part of the point here is spontaneous composition. Some people call this something like first thought, best thought. For me, I think of it as accessing my inner self or shutting up my critical inner editor. When I write poetry, if I'm not careful, I sit there and critique every word. And somewhere along the way, the feelings get lost, the immediacy. And this is a chance to really contact your subconscious, your soul, your true self, the immediate visceral experience of your world. So I'm going to quote Paul here, actually. This project is an experiment in letting go of the need to be perfect and learn to train your mind to compose in the moment. And that is just the most amazing like piece of learning I've gotten from this. Thank you, Paul, is to let go. And one of the things you'll find as you get poems, as well as when you send them, is that you're going to hear from lots of different people, and they write lots of different poems, both in format and in topic. There are people who write about jam making. There are people who write about motorcycle riding. There are people who write about big world problems. And you will get the range of human experience right there with you. Okay, so about the postcards, I think we were talking about like how some people make them, some people don't. Okay, I'm not an artist, so I tend to buy postcards. This is one of my favorite artists, and fortunately, his one of the companies that he works for has started putting his art on postcards. I just love them. So I buy things that reflect me. Other people collect postcards all year because they travel or they see them at different stores and they use those. You can do that. You can make postcards. This is one that I got that I still adore this little guy. And I forget who gave him to me, but I just love postcards that other people make. And there are some really brilliant artists. Was that you, Tim? Then we've got people who do combinations. This is upcycled, thrifted, found art postcards. Ooh, Tim, that was gorgeous. Like I said, somebody did cereal boxes last year, and I just love them. There's some brilliant art on them. You can thrift them from like other stores. You can literally buy blank ones from the post office and do nothing except write on the back. And last thing, a few notes on the project. We encourage people to keep a copy of their postcards. If you make the art, you might want to keep a copy for yourself. If you want to keep the poems, I would strongly recommend keeping a copy. There's a lot of reasons to do that, partly because we do have events through the year, and getting a chance to read one of your poems is a lovely thing to do. For me, I publish sometimes. I'm working on a manuscript right now of poetry, and about half the poems started as postcard poems. So you might keep them for that. And honestly, it's just a lovely way to keep track of what you are going through that year or that summer, what you were experiencing. I keep books of other people's poems because I like to remember that summer by what's in the book that I keep of, just a book of postcards from that year. And the last few things is some etiquette for the fest. Some people start when they get their lists in July. Some people, like me, oldsters, tend to start August 1st because this used to be the August Poetry Postcard Fest, and we put aside August to get one poem out a day. Some people are somewhere in the middle, depending on what their summer schedules are like. Just make sure that by the last day in August, you've gotten all your postcards out if you can. I mean, life does happen, but the goal here is to try and make sure all your postcards are out in the world by the end of August. I will note that if you have international people on your list, some people, and I'm one of them, send the international people out of the order of the list because it takes them a while to get our postcards. If you have to withdraw, we've had people have horrible health issues, family crises. If you need to withdraw or you're not going to be able to complete your list, let your team captain know. Each list will have a team captain. Just let them know that you need to withdraw from the fest. And that way we can make sure that there's somebody else in place in your list so that everybody can get and send the 31 postcards. We've asked that people not post their own poems on social media, on your blog, anything until after the fest is over. That's just so you don't spoil the surprise. Somebody may not have gotten your postcard yet. Things get hung up in the mail. I know my mail, the mailroom that sorts our mail where I live, they like to hang on to the postcards I get because they love reading them. So there's a delay. And you don't want someone to read the poem you sent them personally, person to person, um, before online first. And last but not least, please do not post or share anyone else's poems. So any poems you receive, please don't share them unless you contact that person and get their permission to do so for the context you want to share them in. Okay, we can stop playing pseudo Silicon Valley here. And Zach, would you take over so that you could maybe talk about the new list?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Ina. That was a nice rundown. Um, I guess the first thing I want to say is the reason we're kind of changing up here is um, every year. This is my fourth year, by the way, to answer your question earlier, Ina. Every year that I've been a part of this and been a part of helping make it run, one of the things that happens is we send the list, the first edition of the list out, and then we get two messages back that say, uh, my address isn't quite right, or um, I moved, I signed up in January and then I moved in March, and so my like that's not my address anymore. And we've had everything. I mean, that happens all the time. And then, we've had problems as like for example, because of the sign up process requiring like the PayPal, somebody had their dead name put on the list, which is something we don't want to have happen. Um, and so we've had these problems. We're trying this new system out to try and make sure that we can nip all that in the bud. And we're hopeful that this is going to really minimize the amount of uh, emailing and back and forth and all that we have to do, because what happens with when those lists get messed up is, a lot of times, right, 32 people on that list, two of them, right, three of them, four of them don't see that there's been a new list sent, and they send a postcard with the wrong name or to the wrong address. And we want everybody to get all of their postcards. That's what we're striving for. So that's why we're changing it up. So the system now is this year on June 22nd, circle it in red on your calendars. We're going to send an email, and the email is going to say something along the lines of, please verify your address, or please send us your current address, and you're going to retype your current address, make sure it looks right. Make sure it's got your correct name on it. And as those come in, we will fill up the lists and send those back out. So kind of the order of operations is shifting around a little bit. So that way we can assure that we have the right contact info for everybody. And so the hope is this way we can send each list out once. It's all correct and we're good to go.
I know there's a lot of
And
people who like to get in early and be in the first couple of groups. And so we're going to try and stick as much to that spirit as possible, and it tends to be that the first few groups are people who've done it before and they're eager to re-sign up. So they sign up on September 1st or September 2nd when registration opens for the following year. So we're going to do all we can to ensure that if you registered early, you're going to get on one of the early lists. So I know there was some concern over that, and I just wanted to make that point.
yeah, and then the best way to help yourself in that cause is also to be ready on June 22nd and try and get in there quickly. Because as Paul alluded to, these sometimes relationships develop over the course of a fest or over the course of many fests, and it's nice to participate with those people that you look forward to hearing from. And so, like Paul said, we definitely want to make that happen, and we will do our best, and we appreciate your help as well in that effort.
I just want to add too, if you do want to be in a special list, you're always welcome to send me an email. The contact link on Cascadia Poetics Lab goes straight to my email. So if you have any questions or any requests for the fest, you can send that my way. I've already had some people reach out and I've got a whole list of people that want to be together and all that kind of stuff. So we really do want to help make sure that that happens. So you can always reach out to me.
Does that seem like what we're doing? Is there
That
anything I need to add?
that was a way better explanation than I could have even thought about giving. That was brilliant. And I think we will try to send out a reminder to everyone on the 22nd. Hey, check your email because you really need to respond to this, or we don't know that you want to be here.
And I just want to add that people who do the fest and it clicks for them that they can trust their first impulse. And when I interviewed Allen Ginsberg and he talks specifically about first thought, best thought, it doesn't necessarily mean first thing chronologically, because your first thought might be, oh, I'm having a thought here, or a thought is coming up. But the first thing that seems palpable and real to you, to go with that and to begin to trust your gut. And then there's a whole tradition of spontaneous compositions. Certainly in jazz, it's part of the deal, doing solos and what have you. But the first poem in English, Cadman's Hymn, was received by, I believe it was an illiterate sheep herder or goat herder, something like that. And Ange Linko's essay, From Rilke to Radios, it goes into that whole concept of getting this poetry in spontaneous flashes like Rilke did with the Duino elegies and sonnets to Orpheus. And then if people are interested in saying, hey, there's something to this, well, we encourage them to go to the website, cascadiapoeticslab.org. I'll share a screen here. And you can see that we have the Mapes Creek event coming up on June 8th, 4 to 7 with a potluck with Jim O'Halloran and Susan Pascal. Thank you for the give, big folks. And then our fall workshops. So we already have registration open for Matt Treese's Poet as Radio to kind of go where Jean Cocteau took us in Orpheus, Jack Spicer's line that a poet is a radio tuned to a station from Mars, for instance. So Matt is talking about that and how to really trust your intuition and using chance, divination, games, and ritual. And then, of course, on Robert Duncan's HD book about Hilda Doolittle, The Roots of Modernism, with the man who co-edited that, Michael Bone, and my own life as rehearsal for the poem and poetics as cosmology, featuring these poets, and registration is open for all of those. So that's a great way to expand your sense of spontaneous composition, and the registration is already open. In addition, I'll do one more screen share with the thing, as I was saying about the Ange Linko essay. If you go to paulenelson.com/poetics, there's a whole lot of these essays that go into organic form, projective verse, doing a saturation job, and so on and so forth. Angels to Radios on Rainier Maria Rilke by Ange Blinko. And she talks about Cadman, an illiterate 7th century lay brother who was ashamed of his inability to versify. When the harp was passed around at a feast, he fell asleep in his stable among the animals and dreamed of an angel. And the angel, too, bade him sing. And again, Cadman protested that he did not know any songs. But then, inexplicably, he found himself obeying the angel's dictum, sing the beginning of the creatures. Immediately on waking, he wrote down the eulogy to the world and its maker that had been transmitted to him in his dream. Today, the 9-line Anglo-Saxon Cadman's Hymn is the earliest known English poem, a product of what poets now often call dictation. Isn't that just a great story? I love that so much. So that essay is linked with lots of other essays related to or from an angle on this stance toward poem making. So there's lots of stuff there, and we go into it. We add stuff to it regularly. So you can see that at paulenelson.com/poetics, and I'll drop that in the chat.
I think one more thing that we might have wanted to do was, Sally, if you're also still available, I think Zach and Sally both were going to share a poem or two with us from previous fests, just so people get a feel for what the poems can be like. Y'all still up for that?
Sure. As far as my first year, I believe it was 2018 when I went to Redmond. There was an event, Poets in the Park. So a lot of great events to celebrate poetry. And that's when I heard about the fest and have been around ever since. So I do like postcards with art on them. And so this happened to be one that had an image of some work that Kandinsky had done. And from that, just looking at the image, I then wanted a quote by him. So I just, Googled Kandinsky quotes and found that. So there's a quote and a poem. The more frightening the world becomes, the more art becomes abstract. Degenerate art, a dot, a line, a lifeline for community, for communication, for now. So it fits on the postcard, and I'm happy to have others share their poems.
Zach, you got one?
Yes, just unmuting. So this 2 years ago, I had found a copy of the Kenyon Review, and I cut lines out of that I use sort of as epigraphs, but also as the collage on the front of the postcard. And the height on the postcard that I put it at was in relation to the height of the tide. I live on Alki Beach, and so went out at the same time each morning to write my poem, and the height of that line on the card was the height of the tide that day and that time. So here's the epigraph. In all of you, the voices that fed me were poets. My mind explodes, katsu, chicken, and tiny insects drawing water from the pure flame and shattering the world like Ingo did. As the butterfly's wings close, a new world is formed.
Tim, is that a possible Anybody here who's done this before? Joanne, Mary Beth, happen to have a poem from a previous fest about? Okay. Well, are we, any other questions?
Well, hearing none, poetrypostcardfest.org, the website. Veronica and/or I will answer questions as soon as we possibly can. This is year 19, so there's got to be something to it if it's been going on for that long. And I'm really grateful for the people who come back year after year, and also for the new people who kind of step in and wonder what this is all about, and often sort of get the vibe of it and do it for several years. So really a great way to introduce people to our organization, and the way that it's growing with the Poetry Postcard Fest committee and all the love that goes into it there is a really beautiful and humbling thing. So I'm grateful for all of you for coming tonight. I'm grateful for Veronica for helping set it up and the beautiful work that was read. And Ina, that was a great presentation. I
I
love the
am
graphics. It was fantastic. It was
glad that
inspired.
you forgive me for
Oh,
doing
no,
PowerPoint.
no, no, no. PowerPoint itself is a form, and you used it, you employed it for the force of good, I think.
That's right. We all here are the force for good.
May it be so.
Yes.
Thank
Take
you all.
care, everybody.